Malcolm, what do you mean by pre-K to you? Yes, uh, if I understand if I understand pre-K correctly, Malcolm, I think there's some huge amount around about music apps and about editing. Uh, the iPad and the iPod are not the solution to everything, but some of the things I've seen around garage band and some areas like there, and a bit of PC-based software that is going to come to the iPad very soon is made by a company called Made in Me, which I've just put the link up, which is basically an animated storybook on which the learners and the young people can actually change the kind of monsters they want and that. Okay, yeah, okay, that's fun. There's also some great theatre apps for both the iPad and the iPod. And I'm just turning my iPad on to remind me what they are so I can just mention them to people. Which is the one that I really, really like. And I've just lost for a short term now. I'll have to get it back up and remind everybody there. I think is Puppet Pals, which is worth having a look at. Quite right. As I was talking, currently MobileMe works on an Adobe Air platform, but they are desperately, after I nagged them at a conference when I saw it, producing stuff for iPad, and I've actually seen some stills of the work they're doing there, which is lovely, and I think if they get it to work, it will be great. I think this is linked here. There's some people that I'm going to mention in the UK, and I'm going to give a big shout. And I think Carol and colleagues will have probably heard of them. Tom Barrett is a great guy. He's done some work about using QR codes, but using a whole range of technologies in classrooms. I've also put a good link up to a site that does a whole amount of explains how they work. And also, please don't think that they just work on mobile devices. There are several QR readers that you can basically fit into any laptop or laptop with a webcam plugged in that will do exactly the same as they will with a mobile device. So you could again just tag exercise books or tag objects with a QR code, and there's a whole range of things. In secondary, I've seen it used in libraries and galleries for information. I've seen it used for treasure hunts. I've seen it used extensively for people that have problems with limited typing skills. I think that should apply to me sometimes. I think I've got limited typing skills, actually. And just printing on posters, T-shirts and mugs. What's interesting, if you look at some of the QR codes around now, that they also have ability for you to change where the QR code goes. So the QR code goes to almost a holding page that you can edit over time. So you could have one QR code printed about a school, an area, whatever, but you could change it every month or every week whenever you wanted about where it went to direct it to. Can everybody just give me a yes or a quick yes or a no whether they're happy with the content I'm covering at the moment on the chat screen? You are allowed to say no, everybody. Okay, that's good. That's great. Um, I've done a whole list there. Yeah, I'm going to get away from QR codes. Thank you, Malcolm. That's good. Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things that I'm also interested in is we're going to have. I'm going to bring up some. I've made some controversial remarks about it's not just about teaching and learning. If you're in a formal educational setting, there are some things that mobile devices are going to become very useful for. Has anybody mentioned NFC codes yet, or near field communication yet in the MOOC? I think it's come up a couple of times that I've seen, because I think that's going to be big, and I'll talk a bit through about that as well. I've got some helpful tips for. Oh, the Apple thing and NFC. That's interesting. We'll see if Carol. We'll see if Apple ban NFC. I'm not convinced they're going to yet. I put for those of you that are not academics, and I know some of you are, and I know some of you are obviously practitioners, or some of you are probably both. I get very upset, and I tend to rant about people talking about digital natives. I really like some work by a guy in Oxford University who comes up with the idea of digital residents and digital visitors. Now, what Dave White suggests is that you can be resident on one thing, which means you're very good at it. I, for example, I think I'm quite competent at Twitter. I'm quite competent on Blogger. I'm not particularly, so I'm a digital resident on those mediums. But some other things like YouTube, I'm a bit of a visitor. I pop in, I use it, I don't stay there very long. And I think it's really interesting to think the fact that some learners will be interested in some things and not in others, and that goes with staff. For example, some staff might have an interest in family history and genealogy, so they might be great on the web, but they're not particularly great in music composition. I think it's a really interesting one there. I think there's not been a lot of work done about not just the personalisation of learning, but actually asking learners, what tools they use. And I'll say something quite controversial from the UK perspective when talking about 16-year-olds. I, as a late 40s person, we make assumptions about learners having smartphones. One is they don't have smartphones, and sometimes they have smartphones you wouldn't expect. For example, in the UK, BlackBerries are very popular, which if you talk to my colleagues in New Zealand, BlackBerries are probably the most uncool device you could have. But one of the things that's made it very popular here is BlackBerry messaging, which has become very, on a contract, very cheap and almost free. So BlackBerries are very, but it's interesting to know what learners have, and it's interesting to try and survey them, or maybe get them to survey themselves to see what they use. I think the learners as enablers, we've already talked about that, and collaboration and shared approach with local variation are a good thing. I think to look at UK examples, or to look at US examples, or New Zealand or Australian examples, or some great examples going on in South Africa. I know Mixit's already been mentioned with South Africa, some of the work there that's going on with Mixit and some of the Dr. Math stuff. There's some great stuff there that it doesn't always globally transfer. I think that everybody so far has been incredibly positive, and I think on the whole we haven't talked about the implications of looking at safety within mobile technologies, and the idea of digital privacy and digital awareness about how persistent some things you leave on the web are. And I think we make assumptions that it's young people that are quite often naive, and I think actually sometimes our staff are a little naive. I think there's some materials that the UK think which might be worth having a look at. I think in the EU, some safer internet site stuff, and also some stuff from the about the phone industry itself, phonebrain.org, about how you not to get caught out by costly services. So teaching people to be a bit phone savvy about how much services cost. Carol's just mentioned about GPS. I think location awareness of phones, is a big issue for those people that are involved in child protection, about the ability for with quite crude tools to track phones. Nothing. It looks like a version of a spy program, but it's actually some tools that are quite readily available and are being used by certain worrying groups. Let's go back. Sorry, go back. Carol probably knows half these people, so I just put them up. I put a few lists of people that I follow on Twitter. A lot of those are educationalists who are involved in gaming, but also in mobile as well. some stars there in the mobile space. That Mike Tricano is on there. He's head of ICT for the World Bank, so he's not very important at all. But he's a big regular poster on mobile and in mobile and education in primary and secondary in places like South Africa, Kenya, Uruguay, places like that. We've also got some people on there. Jay Dayenberg, who's a big expert in a Canadian teacher now working in Scotland, who's a big user of geocaching in primary and secondary schools. I'm hoping to try and persuade Jay to do us a slot later in the week on Illuminate. So there are some people there that if you're on Twitter, it's probably worth having. If you're not on Twitter, I suggest you get on Twitter. But if you do try Twitter, promise me one thing: give it 3 weeks, because it took me 3 weeks to get it. And now I probably couldn't live without it in terms of informing very quickly what I want, information, checking ideas, sharing ideas, and collecting resources together. I've also put together a few. I put a couple of educationally, 3 or 4 educationally orientated blogs, and I'd like you possibly to add some more to the list. On the wiki somewhere. I think I've got some. There's a section on mLearning projects that I put up that's worth having a look. But some people in the UK that Simon Finch there, who works for one of our broadband consortiums in the UK, do broadband schools, etc. He does a lot of work on e-safety and copyright and general tech now, as I describe it. James Nishi is one of those people who's just gone ballistic about QR codes and seems to be putting it, using them in lots of different ways. And I've mentioned Tom Barrett's blog. Tom Barrett, interestingly, has just recently left teaching, but he's got about, I think, 7 or 8 years of teaching, and is a prolific blogger and a real sharer of information, massively involved with that. Oh, and Glenn's put up Stephen Downs as well. Yes, Stephen Downs, who we must thank for the MOOC stuff. That him and George Siemens, I think, came up with the idea of the MOOC. Now, I put these all up on SlideShare, so not only are they going to be recorded, but they're also going to be up on SlideShare as well, so you can grab them from there as such. And I've got my SlideShare account at the end of my presentation.